Chapter 1. Chapter 1. The Crumbled Reality. The last chapter had left Brad standing at the precipice of his own despair, the weight of his choices pressing down like a leaden shroud. He had confronted the ghosts of his past, the echoes of laughter that once filled his life now replaced by a suffocating silence. The remnants of his dreams lay scattered around him, much like the crumbled chips on his bed, remnants of a life that felt more like a distant memory than a present reality. He had made a decision, one that would alter the course of his existence, but the details remained shrouded in uncertainty. Brad lay in his dimly lit room, the glow from the street lamp outside casting long shadows that danced across the walls. The air was thick with the stale scent of unwashed laundry and the faint, lingering aroma of the takeout he had ordered days ago but never touched. His bed, a makeshift island in a sea of clutter, was strewn with crumpled bags of chips, their salty remnants a testament to his aimless snacking during sleepless nights. Each chip was a reminder of his mundane existence, a cycle of disappointment that had become all too familiar. He stared at the ceiling, tracing the cracks with his eyes, as if they held the answers to questions he had long since stopped asking. The world outside continued its relentless pace, cars whooshing by, laughter spilling from nearby houses, but inside his room, time had come to a standstill. He felt trapped, ensnared in a web of his own making, longing for something. Anything that could pull him from this abyss. Is this it? He murmured to himself, his voice barely above a whisper. Is this all there is? The question hung in the air, heavy and unanswered, as he rolled onto his side, the crumbled chips shifting beneath him. He could almost hear the mocking laughter of his dreams, taunting him for letting them slip away. A sudden wave of pain crashed over him, sharp and unforgiving, as a migraine seized his temples. He pressed his palms against his forehead, squeezing his eyes shut, willing the throbbing to subside. The darkness behind his eyelids pulsed in time with his heartbeat, a cruel reminder of his own fragility. He had hoped to escape the pain through sleep, but now it felt like a distant shore, just out of reach. Just a little rest, he whispered, his voice cracking. Just a moment of peace. He turned away from the light, burying his face in the pillow, the fabric cool against his skin, a fleeting comfort in a world that felt increasingly hostile. As he drifted into a restless slumber, memories began to swirl around him, vivid and disjointed. He saw her face. Maya. Her laughter like music, a melody that had once filled the empty spaces in his heart. They had shared dreams, whispered secrets under the stars, but those moments felt like fragments of a life he could no longer claim. The ache of her absence was a constant companion, a reminder of what he had lost. Why did you leave? He murmured into the darkness, the question echoing back at him, unanswered. He could almost hear her voice, soft and teasing, telling him to stop wallowing in self-pity. But the truth was, he didn't know how to move forward. The weight of his choices pressed down on him, suffocating and relentless. The migraine intensified, pulling him deeper into a haze of confusion and despair. He felt as if he were sinking, the walls of his room closing in around him, the shadows growing darker, more menacing. He gasped for breath, the air thick and suffocating, and in that moment, he realized he was not just battling a physical ailment. He was grappling with the very essence of his existence. Wake up, Brad, he muttered, shaking his head as if to dispel the darkness. You can't keep doing this. But the words felt hollow, a mantra he had repeated too many times without change. He was caught in a cycle, a crumbled reality that felt impossible to escape. Suddenly, a loud crash jolted him from his thoughts, the sound reverberating through the stillness of his room. He shot up, heart racing, the remnants of sleep evaporating like mist in the morning sun. The noise had come from outside, a cacophony of shouts and laughter that pierced through the fog of his mind. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, the cool floor sending a shiver up his spine as he padded toward the window. Peering through the dusty glass, he saw a group of teenagers gathered on the street, their faces illuminated by the glow of a nearby street lamp. They were carefree, their laughter ringing out like a siren call, a stark contrast to the heaviness that clung to him. He felt a pang of envy, a longing for the simplicity of their joy, the freedom that seemed to elude him. "Look at them," he whispered, bitterness creeping into his voice. "They have no idea what it is like." He turned away from the window, the sight of their happiness a painful reminder of his own isolation. The migraine throbbed in response, a cruel reminder that he was still trapped in this crumbled reality. He stumbled back to his bed, the crumbled chips crunching beneath his weight. As he sank into the mattress, he felt the familiar pull of despair wrapping around him like a shroud. He closed his eyes, willing himself to find solace in sleep once more, but the images of his past flooded back, relentless and unforgiving. Maya's laughter echoed in his mind, a haunting melody that refused to fade. He could see her standing in the park, sunlight dancing in her hair, her eyes sparkling with mischief. They had shared dreams of adventure, of escaping the confines of their small town, but those dreams had withered away, crushed under the weight of reality. "Why did you have to go?" he whispered, the words barely escaping his lips. The silence that followed felt deafening, a void that swallowed his hopes whole. He had tried to move on, to fill the emptiness with distractions, but nothing seemed to work. The ache in his chest was a constant reminder of what he had lost, a wound that refused to heal. As the migraine pulsed in time with his heartbeat, he felt a flicker of anger rise within him. "I can't keep doing this," he thought, frustration boiling over. "I need to change. I need to find a way out." But the path forward felt obscured, shrouded in shadows that loomed larger with each passing day. He lay back against the pillow, the fabric damp with sweat, and closed his eyes once more. "Just a little longer," he murmured, hoping to escape the pain, if only for a moment. But sleep eluded him, the darkness closing in, and he felt the walls of his reality begin to crumble. In that moment of despair, a thought flickered to life, a fragile ember in the darkness. "What if I reached out?" he pondered. Chapter 2. The weight of isolation. Brad awoke to the muted light filtering through the curtains, casting a soft glow over the cluttered remnants of his life. The crumbled chips that had once been a casual snack now lay like forgotten memories on his bedspread, a testament to his recent descent into solitude. The migraine that had plagued him the night before had receded, leaving behind a dull throb that echoed the emptiness he felt inside. He blinked against the brightness, the world outside his window seeming both inviting and alien, a reminder of everything he had chosen to shut out. As he sat up, the sheets tangled around his legs, he felt the familiar weight of isolation settle on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. It was a comfort zone he had unwittingly crafted, a sanctuary of sorts, where the outside world's expectations and disappointments could not reach him. Yet, as he rubbed the sleep from his eyes, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that this cocoon was slowly suffocating him. He glanced at the notebook on his bedside table, its pages filled with half-formed thoughts and fragmented stories. Writing had always been his refuge, a way to escape the mundane reality of his life. But lately, it felt more like a futile exercise, a train destined for the scrap yard, chugging along a track that led nowhere. The words that once flowed effortlessly now felt like stones lodged in his throat, heavy and unyielding. With a sigh, he pushed himself out of bed, the cool wooden floor sending a shiver up his spine. He padded to the kitchen, the faint scent of stale coffee lingering in the air, a reminder of his late-night musings. As he poured himself a cup, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the window. Disheveled hair, dark circles under his eyes, a face that seemed to age a little more each day. He turned away, unwilling to confront the reality staring back at him. The coffee was bitter, but he welcomed the jolt it provided. He leaned against the counter, cradling the mug in his hands, and let his mind wander back to the days when writing felt like a lifeline rather than a burden. He remembered the thrill of crafting characters, of weaving tales that transported him to other worlds. But those days felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the weight of adult responsibilities that had crept in like a thief in the night. A flashback hit him like a wave, pulling him under. He was sitting at a table in a dimly lit cafe, the air thick with the aroma of freshly baked pastries and the low hum of conversation. Across from him sat his father, a stern figure with furrowed brows, his hands clasped tightly around a steaming cup of coffee. "Brad, you need to start thinking about your future," his father had said, his voice a mixture of concern and disappointment. "Writing isn't going to pay the bills. You can't just chase dreams forever." Brad had felt the heat rise in his cheeks, a mix of anger and shame. "But it is what I love, Dad. I can't just give it up." "Love doesn't pay rent," his father had replied, his tone final. "You need to be practical. You have debts to pay, responsibilities to shoulder." The memory faded, leaving behind a bitter taste in his mouth. The weight of his student loans hung over him like a dark cloud, a constant reminder of the choices he had made. He had once believed that passion could conquer all, but reality had a way of shattering dreams, leaving only shards of regret in its wake. As he stood in the kitchen, the silence enveloping him, he felt the familiar pang of despair. The isolation he had sought was now a prison, and he was the warden of his own confinement. He longed for connection, for someone to share his thoughts with, but the fear of rejection kept him anchored to his solitude. The sound of his phone vibrating on the counter broke through his reverie. He picked it up, his heart racing as he saw a message from Mia, his childhood friend. They hadn't spoken in months, and the sudden ping of her name sent a rush of warmth through him. "Hey, Brad. Just checking in. How have you been?" His fingers hovered over the screen, uncertainty gnawing at him. Should he respond honestly, or craft a facade of well-being? He settled for a middle ground, typing out a simple reply. "Hey, Mia. I'm okay. Just busy with work and stuff. How about you?" He hit send, the message disappearing into the digital ether, leaving him with a sense of vulnerability. Moments later, his phone buzzed again. "Same here. Work's been crazy. We should catch up soon." Brad's heart sank. The thought of meeting up felt daunting, like standing at the edge of a cliff, peering into the abyss below. What would he say? How could he explain the weight of his isolation without sounding like a failure? He took a deep breath, trying to quell the rising tide of anxiety. "Yeah, that sounds good. Let me know when you're free." He set the phone down, the conversation lingering in the air like a ghost. The prospect of reconnecting with Mia was both thrilling and terrifying. She had always been a bright spot in his life, a beacon of hope in the darkness. But what if she saw through the cracks in his facade? What if she asked the questions he wasn't ready to answer? The day dragged on, each hour stretching into an eternity. Brad found himself wandering through the house, aimlessly picking up items and putting them back down, as if searching for something he couldn't quite name. The walls felt like they were closing in, the silence growing heavier with each passing moment. As evening approached, he decided to take a walk, hoping the fresh air would clear his mind. He slipped on a worn hoodie and stepped outside, the cool breeze brushing against his skin like a gentle caress. The neighborhood was quiet, the only sounds the rustling of leaves and the distant hum of traffic. He walked aimlessly, his thoughts swirling like autumn leaves caught in a gust of wind. He passed by the local park, where children's laughter echoed in the distance, a stark contrast to the solitude he felt. He paused for a moment, watching a group of kids playing tag, their faces lit up with joy. A pang of longing shot through him, a reminder of the carefree days of his youth when laughter came easily, and the weight of the world felt light. As he continued walking, he found himself at the edge of a small pond, the water reflecting the fading light of the sunset. He sat on a bench, the wood cool beneath him, and stared at the rippling surface. The tranquility of the scene was almost surreal, a moment of peace amidst the chaos in his mind. But as he sat there, the weight of his isolation pressed down on him like a leaden blanket. He felt the urge to reach out, to call someone, anyone, and share the turmoil that churned within him. But the fear of vulnerability held him back, a tight knot in his chest that refused to loosen. Chapter 3. The Encounter. Brad lay in the dim light of his room, the remnants of his life scattered around him like fallen leaves in autumn. Crumbled chip bags littered the bed, remnants of late-night snacking that had become a ritual of comfort in his solitude. The previous night had been a blur of pain and longing, a migraine that felt like a vice squeezing his skull, pushing him deeper into the shadows of his own mind. He had hoped for solace in sleep, but instead, he awoke to the same suffocating silence that had become his constant companion. As he sat up, the morning light filtered through the dusty blinds, casting stripes across the floor. He rubbed his temples, feeling the dull throb of yesterday's headache lingering like an unwelcome guest. The world outside beckoned, a siren call of life and possibility that felt both enticing and terrifying. He had spent too long cocooned in his isolation, and the thought of stepping outside sent a shiver of anxiety down his spine. Yet, the walls of his room felt like they were closing in, and he knew he had to break free, if only for a moment. With a reluctant sigh, Brad pushed himself off the bed, the floor cool against his bare feet. He dressed quickly, pulling on a faded t-shirt and a pair of jeans that had seen better days. He glanced in the mirror, his reflection a ghost of the man he once aspired to be. The stubble on his chin and the dark circles under his eyes told a story of neglect and despair. But today, he would try to change that narrative, if only for a few hours. The air outside was crisp, a refreshing contrast to the stale atmosphere of his room. Brad took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the scent of damp earth and blooming flowers. He stepped onto the cracked pavement of his neighborhood, the familiar sights and sounds washing over him like a long-lost melody. Children laughed in the distance, their voices mingling with the chirping of birds, a symphony of life that felt both foreign and comforting. As he walked, he let his mind wander, contemplating the weight of his thoughts. The pressure of adult responsibilities loomed over him like a storm cloud, but today, he would try to shake it off. He focused on the small things. The way the sun glinted off the dew-kissed grass, the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. Each step felt like a small victory, a rebellion against the inertia that had held him captive for too long. Turning a corner, he found himself in a small park, a hidden gem nestled between the buildings. It was a place he used to visit often, where laughter and joy mingled in the air. But today, it was quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves. He wandered along the path, the crunch of gravel beneath his feet grounding him in the moment. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he spotted a movement near a trash can. Curiosity piqued, he approached cautiously, peering over the edge. There, rummaging through the remnants of someone else's meal, was a raccoon. Its small, masked face was focused intently on its task, paws deftly sifting through the discarded wrappers and scraps. Brad chuckled softly, the sound surprising him. The raccoon paused, its ears twitching at the sound, and for a moment, their eyes met. There was something in that gaze. A shared understanding of survival, of seeking sustenance in a world that often felt indifferent. The raccoon, oblivious to the weight of human worries, continued its search, and Brad felt a flicker of connection. "Hey there, buddy," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Looks like we're both on the hunt for something to fill the void." The raccoon paused again, as if considering his words, before diving back into the trash with renewed vigor. Brad laughed, the sound echoing in the stillness of the park. It was a simple moment, yet it ignited something within him. A spark of hope that had long been extinguished. "Maybe we're not so different after all," he mused aloud, watching as the raccoon triumphantly pulled out a half-eaten sandwich. "You're just trying to make the best of what you've got, right?" The raccoon glanced up, sandwich in its paws, and for a fleeting moment, Brad felt as if they were sharing a secret. The absurdity of the situation struck him, and he found himself laughing again, the sound bubbling up from deep within. It was a laugh that felt foreign yet liberating, a reminder of the simple joys that life could still offer. As he stood there, watching the raccoon enjoy its prize, Brad felt the weight of his despair begin to lift, if only slightly. He realized that he had been so consumed by his own struggles that he had forgotten to appreciate the small moments of joy that life could provide. The raccoon, with its unassuming presence, had reminded him of that truth. "Maybe I need to take a page out of your book," he said, shaking his head with a smile. "Just go for it, no matter how messy it gets." The raccoon, seemingly unbothered by his musings, continued to munch on the sandwich, oblivious to the philosophical revelations unfolding around it. Brad watched, feeling a warmth spread through him, a flicker of hope igniting in the depths of his heart. Perhaps there was a way out of the darkness, a path that didn't involve succumbing to despair. With a newfound sense of purpose, he turned to leave the park, but not before casting one last glance at the raccoon. "Thanks for the reminder, little guy," he said, his voice softening. "I needed that." As he walked away, the laughter still echoing in his mind, Brad felt lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. The world outside his room was still daunting, but now it felt a little less overwhelming. He had shared a moment of connection, however fleeting, and it had reignited a spark within him. But as he made his way back home, the flicker of hope was soon overshadowed by a creeping doubt. What if this was just a temporary reprieve? What if the darkness returned, stronger than before? He shook his head, trying to dispel the negativity that threatened to creep back in. He had to hold on to this feeling, to nurture it like a fragile flame. As he reached his front door, he paused, hand hovering over the knob. The familiar weight of his responsibilities loomed large, but he took a deep breath, reminding himself of the raccoon and the laughter they had shared. He would not let despair win. Not today. With a determined push, he opened the door and stepped inside, ready to face whatever awaited him. But as he crossed the threshold, a sudden noise caught his attention. A soft rustling from the corner of the living room. His heart raced as he turned, the remnants of his earlier joy fading into uncertainty. "Hello," he called out, voice steady despite the flutter of anxiety in his chest. The room was dim, shadows dancing along the walls. Chapter 4. The Dark Thoughts. Brad lay on his bed, the remnants of his life scattered around him like fallen leaves in an autumn storm. The crumbled chips from last night's snack crunched beneath him, a reminder of his aimless existence. He had awoken from a fitful sleep, the migraine that had plagued him now a dull throb in the back of his mind. The isolation he had once found comforting now felt like a shackle, binding him to a life he barely recognized. He had spent the previous day wandering through the streets, a fleeting moment of connection with a raccoon stirring something deep within him. a flicker of hope that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. But now, back in the dim light of his room, the shadows crept in, whispering the same old lies. He was a failure, a burden to those around him, a ghost haunting the edges of his own life. The weight of self-loathing pressed down on him, and he could almost hear the echoes of his own thoughts, taunting him with every breath. He sat up, the sheets sliding off his body like a second skin. The walls of his room felt like they were closing in, the familiar clutter morphing into a prison of his own making. He glanced at the notebook on his desk, its pages filled with half-formed ideas and abandoned dreams. Writing had always been his refuge, a place where he could pour out his soul, but lately, it felt more like a tomb for his darkest thoughts. With a deep breath, he reached for the notebook, the paper cool against his fingertips. He flipped to a blank page, the stark whiteness staring back at him like a blank canvas waiting for color. He hesitated, the weight of his emotions swirling inside him like a tempest. But he knew he had to write. It was the only way to confront the demons that lurked in the corners of his mind. As he began to write, the words flowed out like a river breaking free from a dam. The poem took shape, dark and twisted, reflecting the turmoil within him. Each line was a confession, a raw exploration of his pain, his fears, and the suffocating sense of inadequacy that clung to him like a second skin. I am the shadow in the corner, the whisper in the dark, a flicker of a flame extinguished, a question without an answer, a burden too heavy to bear. He paused, his heart racing as he read the lines back to himself. The words resonated with a truth he couldn't escape, and yet, with each stroke of the pen, he felt a deeper despair settle in his chest. The act of creation, which had once been a source of solace, now felt like a descent into a darker abyss. He slammed the notebook shut, frustration boiling over. "What's the point?" he muttered to himself, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're just digging your own grave." The silence of the room enveloped him, amplifying his thoughts until they became a cacophony of self-doubt. He stood up abruptly, pacing the small confines of his room, the floor creaking beneath his weight. The walls felt like they were closing in, and he could almost hear the mocking laughter of his insecurities. He was a failure, a writer who couldn't write, a man who couldn't even face his own reflection without cringing. But then, amidst the chaos, a sudden realization struck him like a bolt of lightning. He had been running from his demons, allowing them to consume him, to dictate the narrative of his life. What if, instead of hiding, he confronted them? What if he faced the darkness head-on, armed with nothing but his words and the flicker of hope that had ignited during his encounter with the raccoon? The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. He could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins, a spark of defiance igniting within him. He had spent too long wallowing in self-pity, too long allowing the shadows to dictate his reality. It was time to take control, to rewrite the story that had been haunting him for far too long. He returned to his desk, the notebook now a beacon of possibility. He opened it again, the pages waiting eagerly for his thoughts. This time, he didn't write about despair. He wrote about resilience. He wrote about the struggle, the fight against the darkness that threatened to swallow him whole. I am the light in the shadows, the voice that breaks the silence, a flicker of hope in the night, a warrior rising from the ashes, a story waiting to be told. As the words flowed, he felt a shift within himself. The heaviness that had settled in his chest began to lift, replaced by a sense of purpose. He was not just a victim of his circumstances. He was the author of his own narrative. Hours passed as he poured his heart onto the pages, the sun dipping below the horizon, casting a warm glow through the window. The shadows in his room began to recede, replaced by the soft light of his newfound determination. He was still scared, still uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a glimmer of hope. Just as he finished the last line, a knock on the door startled him. He looked up, heart racing, as the door creaked open. It was his sister, Lily, her expression a mix of concern and curiosity. "Hey, I brought you some dinner," she said, holding a plate of steaming food. "I thought you might need a break from whatever this is." She gestured to the chaos of his room, her eyes scanning the scattered papers and empty chip bags. "Thanks," he replied, forcing a smile. "I was just writing." "Writing," she echoed, stepping further into the room. "You've been doing a lot of that lately. Is it helping?" He hesitated, the weight of his emotions threatening to spill over. "I don't know, Lily. Sometimes it feels like I'm just digging deeper into the darkness." She set the plate down on his desk, her gaze steady. "You know, it is okay to feel that way. But you can't let it consume you. You have to fight back." Her words struck a chord within him, resonating with the realization he had just come to. "I know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I think I'm starting to understand that. I don't know how." Lily stepped closer, her presence a comforting balm against the turmoil within him. "You start by being honest with yourself. You write about the darkness, but you also write about the light. You have to acknowledge both." He nodded, the weight of her words settling in. "I think I'm ready to do that," he admitted, a sense of resolve washing over him. "I want to confront my demons, not just let them win." A smile broke across her face, and for the first time in what felt like ages, he felt a flicker of warmth in his chest. That's the spirit. Chapter 5. Chapter 5. The Turning Point. Brad lay in his dimly lit room, the remnants of his life scattered around him like fallen leaves in autumn. The crumbled chips on his bed were a testament to his neglect, a physical manifestation of the chaos swirling in his mind. He had spent the previous night wrestling with his thoughts, the weight of disappointment pressing down on him like a heavy blanket. A sudden migraine had driven him into the embrace of sleep, a desperate attempt to escape the pain that had become all too familiar. But now, as he blinked against the morning light filtering through the curtains, he felt a flicker of something he hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. It was a fragile thing, like a newly sprouted seed pushing through the soil, but it was there. Brad sat up, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, and took a deep breath. The air was stale, tinged with the scent of old pizza and unwashed laundry, but he was determined to change that. Today would be different. Today, he would take a leap of faith. He opened his laptop, the screen flickering to life with a soft hum. The familiar weight of anxiety settled in his chest as he navigated to the poetry forum he had stumbled upon weeks ago. He had been lurking in the shadows, reading the heartfelt verses of others, absorbing their pain and beauty. But now, he felt an urge to contribute, to share his own words that had been trapped inside him for too long. With trembling fingers, he opened a new post. The blank page stared back at him, a canvas waiting for color. He hesitated, recalling the dark poem he had written the night before, the one that had poured out of him like a storm. It was raw and unfiltered, a reflection of his despair, but it was also a part of him. He had to be brave. He had to show the world his truth. After a moment of deep breathing, he began to type. The words flowed from him, each line a cathartic release. He wrote about the darkness that clung to him, the suffocating weight of expectations, and the flickering light of hope that had begun to break through. When he finished, he stared at the screen, heart racing. Could he really do this? Could he expose his soul to strangers? With a deep breath, he clicked post. The act felt monumental, like standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to jump into the unknown. He closed his eyes for a moment, allowing the rush of adrenaline to wash over him. Then, he opened them and waited. Minutes passed, each second stretching into an eternity. Just as doubt began to creep in, a notification pinged. His heart leapt as he read the comment. "This is beautiful. Thank you for sharing." A smile broke across his face, a genuine one that felt foreign yet exhilarating. He scrolled down to see more comments, each one a thread of connection woven into the fabric of his isolation. "Your words resonate with me," one reader wrote. "I've felt this way too." Another added, "Keep writing. You have a gift." With each new notification, Brad felt a warmth spreading through him, igniting a spark of confidence he hadn't known he possessed. For the first time in a long while, he felt seen. The validation from strangers, people who understood his pain and celebrated his vulnerability, was intoxicating. It was as if the walls he had built around himself were beginning to crumble, brick by brick. As the day wore on, Brad found himself immersed in the forum, engaging with other writers, sharing thoughts and critiques. He felt a sense of belonging that had eluded him for years. Each interaction was a small victory, a reminder that he was not alone in his struggles. He began to explore the idea of writing more seriously, not just as a hobby but as a potential path forward. That evening, he sat at his desk, the glow of the laptop illuminating his face. He opened a new document and began to write again, this time with a sense of purpose. The words flowed more freely, each sentence a step toward reclaiming his identity. He wrote about the raccoon he had encountered, the unexpected connection that had sparked a flicker of hope within him. He wrote about the beauty of vulnerability, the strength it took to share one's truth. As he typed, he felt a shift within himself. The self-loathing thoughts that had plagued him began to fade, replaced by a burgeoning sense of self-worth. He was a writer, and his words mattered. He could create something meaningful, something that resonated with others. But just as he was beginning to feel invincible, a shadow of doubt crept back in. What if this was just a fleeting moment of clarity? What if he failed again? The familiar weight of fear settled back onto his shoulders, threatening to pull him under. He paused, fingers hovering over the keys. The thought of failure loomed large, but he remembered the comments from the forum, the encouragement from strangers who had found solace in his words. He took a deep breath, grounding himself in the present moment. "Failure is just a part of the journey," he whispered to himself, echoing the words of a mentor he had once admired. "It doesn't define you." With renewed determination, he continued to write, pouring his heart onto the page. The words became a lifeline, a way to navigate the turbulent waters of his emotions. He wrote late into the night, the world outside fading away as he lost himself in the rhythm of his thoughts. As the clock ticked past midnight, Brad leaned back in his chair, exhaustion settling in. He had written more than he ever thought possible, and for the first time, he felt a sense of accomplishment. He saved the document, a tangible representation of his progress, and closed the laptop with a satisfied sigh. But just as he was about to turn off the light, a notification pinged again. He opened his laptop, curiosity piqued. Another comment had appeared on his post, but this one was different. It was longer, more personal. "Your words struck a chord with me. I've been in a dark place too, and your poem gave me hope. I'd love to connect and share more about our journeys." Brad's heart raced. This was more than just validation. It was an invitation to connect, to share his story with someone who understood. He felt a rush of excitement mixed with trepidation. Could he really open up to someone else? He hesitated, fingers hovering over the keyboard. But the thought of continuing to hide in the shadows felt suffocating. He took a deep breath and began to type a response, his heart pounding in his chest. "Thank you for your kind words. I'd love to connect and share our stories. It's nice to know I'm not alone in this. As he hit send, a wave of vulnerability washed over him. He was stepping into the unknown, but for the first time, it felt like a step towards something greater. The night deepened around him, the world outside quieting as he waited for a response. He felt a mix of anticipation and fear. Chapter 6. Chapter 6. The unexpected twist. Brad had never been one to seek the spotlight. The dim light of his room, with its crumpled chip bags and scattered notes, had always felt like a safe cocoon, a place where he could hide from the world's judgment. But after sharing his poetry online and receiving unexpected encouragement, a flicker of hope ignited within him. He had decided to take a leap of faith, to confront his demons instead of letting them consume him. It was a small step, but it felt monumental. Now, he stood at the precipice of something new. A local poetry slam competition. As he scrolled through the event details on his phone, the words blurred together. The excitement of the writing community buzzed in his veins, but so did the familiar tendrils of fear. What if he stumbled over his words? What if no one connected with his poetry? The thought of standing in front of a crowd, bearing his soul, sent a shiver down his spine. He took a deep breath, the air thick with the scent of stale chips and old books, and reminded himself that he had come this far. Just do it, he muttered under his breath, echoing the mantra he had adopted since sharing his work online. He clenched his fists, feeling the rough edges of his calloused palms. This was his moment, and he wouldn't let fear dictate his choices any longer. The night of the event arrived, cloaked in a velvet darkness that felt both inviting and intimidating. Brad stood outside the venue, a small, intimate cafe that had transformed into a haven for poets and dreamers. The warm glow of fairy lights spilled onto the sidewalk, illuminating the faces of eager attendees. He could hear the low hum of laughter and the clinking of glasses, a symphony of life that both thrilled and terrified him. "Come on, Brad," he whispered to himself, his heart racing. "You can do this." He pushed through the door, the scent of freshly brewed coffee and baked goods wrapping around him like a comforting embrace. The walls were adorned with local art, and the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. As he stepped further inside, he felt a wave of nostalgia wash over him. This cafe had been a refuge during his college days, a place where he and his friends had gathered to share dreams and fears over steaming cups of coffee. But tonight, it felt different. Tonight, he was alone, standing on the edge of a new chapter in his life. "Brad!" A familiar voice called out, pulling him from his reverie. He turned, and his breath caught in his throat. There, standing by the bar, was Mia. His old friend from college, her vibrant red hair cascading over her shoulders like a fiery waterfall. "Mia!" he exclaimed, a mix of surprise and joy flooding through him. They hadn't seen each other in years, and the sight of her brought back a rush of memories. Late-night study sessions, shared laughter, and whispered secrets. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with genuine delight. "I didn't know you were into poetry." "I'm not really," he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. "But I decided to give it a shot. I'm actually performing tonight." Her expression shifted, a blend of admiration and empathy. "That's amazing, Brad. I'm so proud of you. I've been trying to get back into writing myself." "Really? I remember how passionate you were about it," he said, his heart swelling with warmth. "What happened?" Mia sighed, her smile faltering for a moment. "Life, I guess. After college, everything got so complicated. I've been working a dead-end job, and it is hard to find the time or energy to write." Brad felt a pang of understanding. He had been there, trapped in the grind of adulthood, suffocated by responsibilities. "I get it. It's tough to keep the spark alive when you're just trying to survive." Exactly, she said, her eyes searching his. But I'm trying to change that. I signed up for this competition too. His heart raced. You're performing tonight. Yeah, she replied, her voice steady but her hands fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. I thought it might help me reconnect with that part of myself. Brad felt a rush of excitement mixed with anxiety. They were both stepping into the unknown, two old friends navigating the same turbulent waters. We can do this together, he said, a smile breaking across his face. Let's support each other. Absolutely, Mia agreed, her smile returning, brighter than before. They shared a moment of camaraderie, a silent promise that they wouldn't face this challenge alone. As the event began, the atmosphere shifted, charged with energy. The host, a charismatic poet with a booming voice, welcomed everyone and set the stage for the night. Brad's heart raced as he listened to the first few performers, each sharing their stories with raw vulnerability. The words hung in the air, weaving a tapestry of emotions that resonated deep within him. Next up, we have Brad. The host announced, and the crowd erupted into applause. Brad's stomach dropped. He felt the weight of 1,000 eyes on him, each one scrutinizing his every move. He took a deep breath, glancing at Mia, who gave him an encouraging nod. Go get him, she mouthed, and he felt a surge of determination. He stepped onto the stage, the wooden floor creaking beneath his feet. The spotlight felt blinding, but he focused on the audience, searching for a friendly face. He found Mia, her eyes shining with encouragement, and it steadied him. Hi, everyone, he began, his voice trembling slightly. I'm Brad, and I'm here to share a piece that's really personal to me. As he recited his poem, the words flowed from him like a river breaking free from a dam. Each line was a confession, a piece of his soul laid bare for the world to see. He spoke of loneliness, of longing, and the struggle to find meaning in the chaos of life. The audience listened intently, their faces reflecting a myriad of emotions. Understanding, empathy, and even pain. When he finished, the room erupted into applause, and he felt a rush of exhilaration. He had done it. He had shared his truth, and it resonated. As he stepped off the stage, Mia rushed to him, her face alight with excitement. You were incredible. I felt every word. Thanks, he said, breathless. I can't believe I actually did it. Of course you did. You have a gift, Brad. You need to keep writing. Before he could respond, the host announced Mia's name, and she took the stage with a confidence that surprised him. As she began to recite her poem, he felt a swell of pride. She spoke of her struggles, her dreams, and the weight of expectations. Her words were powerful, and he could see the audience hanging on her every syllable. Chapter 7. Chapter 7. The performance. The dim light of the stage flickered like a heartbeat, casting shadows that danced across the faces of the audience. Brad stood behind the curtain, his heart pounding in rhythm with the distant thrum of the crowd. Just moments ago, he had been lost in thought, recalling the crumbled chips on his bed and the suffocating weight of his isolation. But now, as he prepared to step into the spotlight, he felt a flicker of something he hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. In the previous chapter, Brad had wrestled with his demons, grappling with feelings of inadequacy and despair. He had taken a leap of faith by sharing his poetry online, and to his astonishment, the response had been overwhelmingly positive. Strangers had reached out, offering words of encouragement that ignited a spark within him. It was this newfound confidence that had led him to the local poetry slam, where he had unexpectedly reunited with an old friend, Sarah, who had once shared his struggles. Their heartfelt conversation had reminded him of the power of connection, and now, standing on the precipice of performance, he felt the weight of his journey pressing against his chest. Brad. Sarah's voice cut through the haze of his thoughts, pulling him back to the present. She stood beside him, her auburn hair catching the light, framing her face in a halo. "You ready?" He nodded, though his throat felt tight. "I think so. Just a little nervous." "Good," she said, her eyes sparkling with encouragement. "Nerves mean you care. Just remember, you're not alone up there. We're all rooting for you." Her words wrapped around him like a warm blanket, and he took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of her lavender perfume mixed with the faint aroma of coffee from the cafe below. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation, and he could hear snippets of conversation from the audience. Laughter, whispers, the clinking of glasses. It was a world he had longed to be part of, a world where vulnerability was celebrated rather than shunned. As the host called his name, Brad stepped forward, the curtain parting like a veil. The stage lights hit him, blinding at first, but as his eyes adjusted, he saw the sea of faces before him. Some were familiar, others strangers, but all were united in this moment. He could feel their energy, a palpable current that surged through the air, and for the first time, he didn't feel like an outsider looking in. He approached the microphone, his palms clammy against the cool metal. The audience quieted, their attention shifting to him, and he could hear the soft rustle of paper as they settled in. He cleared his throat, the sound echoing in the silence, and began. "This is a piece I wrote about my journey. About pain, resilience, and finding hope in the darkest places." His voice trembled slightly, but he pressed on, pouring his heart into the words he had crafted in the solitude of his room. As he recited the poem, each line felt like a confession, a release of the burdens he had carried for so long. He spoke of sleepless nights, of feeling like a ghost in his own life, and of the moments that had sparked a flicker of light in his darkness. The audience leaned in, their expressions shifting from curiosity to empathy, and he could see nods of understanding ripple through the crowd. With every stanza, he felt the weight of his past lifting, the pain transforming into something beautiful. The rhythm of his words flowed like a river, carrying with it the essence of his struggles and triumphs. He could see Sarah in the front row, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, and it fueled him further. He was no longer just sharing his story. He was inviting them all into his world, a world where vulnerability was a strength, not a weakness. As he reached the climax of the poem, his voice rose, filled with passion and urgency. "And in that moment of despair, I found a glimmer of hope. A reminder that even in the darkest nights, the stars still shine." The final words hung in the air, a fragile echo of his journey, and he felt a wave of catharsis wash over him. The silence that followed was deafening, a collective breath held in anticipation. Then, as if released from a spell, the audience erupted into applause. The sound enveloped him, a warm embrace that filled the void he had felt for so long. He stood there, heart racing, as the claps and cheers washed over him like a tide, and for the first time, he felt seen and heard. Brad's chest swelled with emotion, and he couldn't help but smile, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. He had shared his truth, and in return, he had received acceptance. It was a moment of connection, a reminder that he was not alone in his struggles. The applause continued, and he took a step back from the microphone, bowing his head in gratitude. As he left the stage, the adrenaline coursing through him, he was met by Sarah, who enveloped him in a tight hug. "You were incredible," she exclaimed, her voice barely audible over the lingering applause. "I knew you could do it." Brad laughed, the sound bubbling up from a place of pure joy. "I can't believe I actually did it. You poured your heart out up there. That's what it is all about," she said, her eyes shining with pride. "You have a gift, Brad. Don't ever doubt that." He felt a warmth spread through him at her words, a sense of validation that he had longed for. "Thank you for being here. I don't think I could have done it without you." As they stepped away from the stage, the energy of the room buzzed around them. Brad could see other poets mingling, sharing their own stories, and he felt a pull to join them. The fear that had once held him captive began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of belonging he hadn't anticipated. "Let's celebrate," Sarah suggested, her enthusiasm infectious. "There's a little cafe down the street that has the best hot chocolate." "You deserve it." Brad nodded, his heart still racing from the performance. "That sounds perfect." As they made their way through the crowd, Brad caught snippets of conversations. People discussing their favorite pieces, sharing laughter, and connecting over shared experiences. It was a vibrant tapestry of humanity, and he felt a part of it for the first time. The weight of his past still lingered, but it no longer felt insurmountable. Instead, it was a part of him, woven into the fabric of his identity. Outside, the cool night air hit him like a refreshing wave, and he inhaled deeply, savoring the scent of rain-soaked pavement and blooming jasmine. The city felt alive, pulsating with energy, and he couldn't help but smile at the possibilities that lay ahead. As they walked, Sarah turned to him, her expression shifting to something more serious. "Brad, I know this is just the beginning for you." Chapter 8. Chapter 8. The Aftermath. The echoes of applause still reverberated in Brad's mind as he stepped off the stage, his heart racing with a mix of exhilaration and disbelief. Just moments ago, he had bared his soul to a room full of strangers, and their response had been a tidal wave of acceptance. The warmth of their applause wrapped around him like a comforting blanket, a stark contrast to the cold isolation he had grown accustomed to. As he navigated through the crowd, he felt a sense of belonging that had eluded him for so long. Now, standing in the dimly lit corner of the cafe where the poetry slam had taken place, Brad clutched the small notebook that had been his lifeline. The pages were filled with fragments of his thoughts, raw and unfiltered. He could hardly believe that just a few weeks ago, he had been trapped in a cycle of despair, drowning in self-loathing and doubt. But tonight, he had stepped into the light, and the world felt different. "Hey, Brad." A familiar voice broke through his reverie. He turned to see Mia, her eyes sparkling with excitement. She had been one of the first to approach him after his performance, her enthusiasm infectious. "You were incredible. I mean, seriously, I felt every word." "Thanks, Mia," he replied, a shy smile creeping onto his face. "I didn't expect it to feel like that." "Gee, like what?" she asked, tilting her head slightly, her curly hair bouncing with the movement. "Like, I don't know, like I actually mattered," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. The vulnerability of the moment hung between them, a fragile thread connecting their shared experiences. Mia's expression softened. "You do matter, Brad. You have a gift. And you're not alone in this. We're all fighting our own battles." Her words struck a chord deep within him, resonating with the truth he had been too afraid to acknowledge. He had spent so long feeling like a burden, convinced that his struggles were his alone to bear. But standing here, surrounded by people who understood, he felt a flicker of hope igniting within him. As the night wore on, Brad found himself enveloped in conversations with fellow writers, each sharing their stories of pain and triumph. They spoke of rejection letters, sleepless nights spent crafting the perfect line, and the relentless pursuit of validation. With every shared experience, Brad felt the weight of his isolation begin to lift, replaced by a sense of camaraderie that was both exhilarating and terrifying. "Hey, Brad." A tall man with tousled hair and an easy smile approached him, extending a hand. "I'm Jake. I loved your piece tonight. It was raw and real." Thanks, man, Brad replied, shaking his hand. I appreciate that. Have you ever thought about collaborating on something? I think our styles could mesh well, Jake suggested, his enthusiasm palpable. Brad's heart raced at the prospect. Collaborating. It felt like a door opening to a world he had only dared to dream about. I'd love that, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. What did you have in mind? As they exchanged ideas, Brad felt a sense of purpose blossoming within him. The fear that had once paralyzed him began to dissipate, replaced by a determination to embrace this newfound community. He was no longer just a solitary writer. He was part of something bigger, a tapestry woven from the threads of shared experiences and collective struggles. Later that night, as he lay in bed, the remnants of the evening replayed in his mind like a cherished film. The laughter, the camaraderie, the feeling of being seen. It was intoxicating. He glanced at the notebook resting on his bedside table, its pages filled with the raw emotions he had poured out during the slam. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of direction, a flicker of hope that perhaps he could carve out a space for himself in the world. But as the excitement of the evening began to fade, a familiar shadow crept back into his thoughts. What if this was just a fleeting moment of joy? What if he was destined to return to the darkness that had consumed him for so long? The doubts whispered in his mind, clawing at the edges of his newfound confidence. The next morning, Brad awoke to the soft glow of sunlight filtering through his curtains. He stretched, feeling the warmth on his skin, and for a moment, he allowed himself to bask in the afterglow of the previous night. But as he sat up, the weight of reality settled back onto his shoulders. He had bills to pay, responsibilities that loomed like dark clouds on the horizon. He shuffled to the kitchen, the familiar scent of coffee brewing filling the air. As he poured himself a cup, he glanced at the calendar hanging on the wall. The due dates for his bills stared back at him, a stark reminder of the life he was trying to escape. The excitement of the poetry slam felt distant, like a dream fading in the light of day. Get it together, Brad, he muttered to himself, taking a sip of the bitter brew. He needed to focus, to channel the energy from the night before into something productive. He grabbed his notebook and settled at the small table, determined to write. But as he stared at the blank page, the words eluded him. The pressure of reality pressed down, suffocating the spark of creativity that had ignited within him. He felt the familiar pang of self-doubt creeping in, whispering that he was a fraud, that he didn't belong in this world of writers and poets. Just as he was about to close the notebook in frustration, his phone buzzed on the table, breaking the silence. He picked it up, his heart racing as he saw a notification from the poetry community he had joined online. A message from a fellow writer, inviting him to collaborate on a project. The excitement surged through him, but it was quickly followed by a wave of anxiety. What if he let them down? What if he couldn't deliver? Stop it, he scolded himself, taking a deep breath. You can do this. He typed a response, his fingers trembling slightly as he expressed his interest. As he hit send, a sense of determination washed over him. He was stepping into the unknown, embracing the uncertainty that came with pursuing his passion. It was terrifying, but it was also exhilarating. The days that followed were a whirlwind of creativity and connection. Brad found himself immersed in the writing community, collaborating with Jake and others on various projects. They shared ideas, critiqued each other's work, and celebrated small victories together. The sense of belonging he had craved for so long was finally within reach. But amidst the excitement, Brad couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing beneath the surface. The more he connected with others, the more he felt the weight of his own struggles. He had shared his poetry, his pain, but there were still parts of himself he kept hidden, locked away in the shadows. One evening, after a particularly intense writing session, Brad found himself sitting alone in his room. Chapter 9. Chapter 9. The New Path. The dim light of dawn filtered through the tattered curtains of Brad's room, casting a soft glow over the remnants of his life. Crumbled chip bags lay strewn across his bed, remnants of late-night snacking that had become a ritual of comfort in his solitude. The echoes of his last poetry slam still reverberated in his mind, a bittersweet reminder of the vulnerability he had shared with the audience. For the first time in years, he felt a flicker of hope, a spark ignited by the applause that had washed over him like a warm tide. But as the sun rose, so did the familiar weight of self-doubt, pressing down on his chest like a heavy stone. Brad sat up, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, the remnants of a migraine still lingering at the edges of his consciousness. He had spent the night tossing and turning, wrestling with thoughts that spiraled like autumn leaves caught in a gust of wind. The realization that he had shared his poetry with the world was both exhilarating and terrifying. What if it was a fluke? What if the applause had been nothing more than a fleeting moment of pity? He shook his head, trying to dispel the negativity that clung to him like a shadow. With a deep breath, he pushed himself out of bed, the cool floor sending a shiver up his spine. He needed to shake off the remnants of doubt. Today was a new day, and he was determined to embrace it. He made his way to the small kitchen, the scent of stale coffee lingering in the air, a reminder of his late-night writing sessions. As he brewed a fresh pot, he glanced at the stack of notebooks piled high on the counter, each one filled with fragments of his thoughts, poems, and stories waiting to be born. The idea struck him like a bolt of lightning. He would start a blog. A place to document his journey, to share his struggles and triumphs with others who felt lost and alone. He imagined the words flowing from his fingertips, weaving a tapestry of connection that could reach beyond the confines of his room. It was a chance to inspire others, to show them that even in the darkest moments, there was a path forward. After finishing his coffee, Brad settled at his desk, the familiar creak of the chair grounding him in the moment. He opened his laptop, the screen illuminating his face in a soft glow. As he began to type, the words poured out of him like a river breaking free from its banks. He wrote about his battles with self-doubt, the moments of despair that had threatened to swallow him whole, and the unexpected joy he had found in the writing community. Each keystroke felt like a release, a cathartic expression of everything he had kept bottled up inside. "Hey, what are you working on?" a voice interrupted, pulling him from his thoughts. It was Mia, his old friend from the poetry slam, her bright smile lighting up the room. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, a playful glint in her eyes. Brad's heart raced at the sight of her. "Just starting a blog," he replied, a hint of pride creeping into his voice. "I want to document my journey, you know. Share my writing and connect with others." Mia's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. "That's amazing. You have such a unique voice, Brad. People need to hear it." She stepped closer, her presence filling the room with warmth. "I'd love to help you out. We could brainstorm ideas together." Brad felt a rush of gratitude. "Really? That would be great." He gestured to the chair beside him, and she settled in, her energy infectious. They spent the next hour bouncing ideas off each other, laughter punctuating their conversation as they crafted a vision for the blog. With each suggestion, Brad felt his confidence swell, the weight of his insecurities lifting just a little. As they wrapped up their brainstorming session, Mia leaned back in her chair, her expression turning serious. "You know, Brad, I've been thinking about what you shared on stage the other night. Your story resonated with so many people. It's okay to be vulnerable, to show your imperfections. That's what makes us human. Brad's heart raced at her words. I guess I've always been afraid of being judged. It's easier to hide behind my writing than to face the world. Mia nodded, her gaze steady. But you're not alone in this. We all have our struggles. Embracing those imperfections can lead to beautiful connections. You're already on that path. Her words hung in the air, a gentle reminder of the journey he had begun. Brad felt a swell of emotion, a mixture of gratitude and fear. I want to believe that, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. But sometimes it feels like I'm just pretending. Then don't pretend, Mia said softly, her eyes searching his. Be real. Share your truth, even when it is messy. That's where the magic happens. Brad swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling deep within him. He had spent so long hiding, afraid of the world's judgment, but perhaps it was time to step into the light. I'll try, he said, a flicker of determination igniting within him. As the days passed, Brad immersed himself in his writing, exploring different styles and genres. He experimented with poetry, prose, and even short stories, each piece a reflection of his evolving self. The blog became a canvas for his thoughts, a place where he could share not only his triumphs but also his struggles. He wrote about the beauty in imperfection, the importance of connection, and the power of vulnerability. With each post, he felt a sense of liberation, as if he were shedding the layers of doubt that had clung to him for so long. The response was overwhelming. Comments flooded in from readers who resonated with his words, sharing their own stories of struggle and resilience. Brad felt a sense of belonging he had never experienced before. He was no longer just a solitary writer. He was part of a community, a tapestry of voices woven together by shared experiences. One evening, as he sat at his desk, the soft glow of his laptop illuminating the room, he received a message that made his heart skip a beat. It was from a reader named Sarah, who had stumbled upon his blog and was deeply moved by his story. She wrote about her own battles with anxiety and depression, expressing how his words had inspired her to seek help and embrace her own journey. Tears pricked at the corners of Brad's eyes as he read her message. He felt a profound sense of connection, a reminder that his words had the power to touch lives. He quickly typed a response, thanking her for her honesty and encouraging her to keep fighting. In that moment, he realized that his writing was not just an outlet for his pain. It was a lifeline for others. As the weeks turned into months, Brad continued to grow, both as a writer and as a person. He attended local writing workshops, met fellow creatives, and even collaborated on projects that pushed him out of his comfort zone. Chapter 10. Chapter 10. The future awaits. Brad stood at the edge of the park, the cool evening breeze tousling his hair as he gazed out at the horizon. The sun dipped low, casting a warm golden hue over the landscape, a stark contrast to the shadows that had loomed over him for so long. Just days ago, he had been trapped in a cycle of despair, surrounded by the remnants of his life. Crumpled chips on his bed, the weight of his isolation pressing down on him like a heavy blanket. But now, after sharing his poetry and finding unexpected validation, a flicker of hope ignited within him. He felt as if he were standing at a crossroads, the path ahead shrouded in uncertainty but glimmering with potential. As he took a deep breath, the scent of freshly cut grass mingled with the earthy aroma of the nearby trees, grounding him in the moment. The laughter of children echoed in the distance, a reminder of the simple joys he had almost forgotten. He closed his eyes, allowing the sounds to wash over him, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of belonging. The poetry slam had been a turning point, a cathartic release that had opened doors he never knew existed. But now, standing here, he was acutely aware that the journey was far from over. "Hey, Brad," A familiar voice called out, breaking his reverie. He turned to see Mia approaching, her vibrant smile lighting up her face. She had been a constant source of encouragement since their reunion, her unwavering belief in his talent pushing him to explore new horizons. "Hey," he replied, a smile breaking across his own face. "What are you doing here?" "I thought I'd find you here," she said, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "You've been spending so much time in your head lately, I figured you could use some fresh air." Brad chuckled, the sound feeling foreign yet welcome. "You're not wrong. I've been trying to figure out what's next for me." Mia leaned against a nearby tree, her arms crossed casually. "Well, what are you thinking? You've got a lot of momentum going right now. Why not ride the wave?" He hesitated, the weight of her question settling heavily on his shoulders. "I don't know. I mean, I've started writing more, and the blog is gaining traction, but what if it is just a phase? What if I'm just fooling myself?" "Brad," she said, her tone serious now, "you're not fooling anyone. You have a gift. You've touched people with your words. Just look at the comments on your blog. People are connecting with you." He glanced down at his phone, where notifications from his blog had begun to pile up. Each comment was a small affirmation, a reminder that he wasn't alone in his struggles. But doubt still gnawed at him, a persistent whisper that threatened to drown out the encouragement. "I guess I'm just scared," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "What if I put myself out there and fail? What if I'm not good enough?" Mia stepped closer, her expression softening. "You won't know unless you try. And even if you stumble, it is part of the journey. Life isn't about perfection. It is about growth. You've already come so far." Her words resonated deep within him, echoing the realization he had come to during his darkest moments. Life was indeed a journey filled with ups and downs, and it was okay to seek help along the way. He had spent too long wallowing in self-doubt, allowing it to dictate his choices. It was time to embrace the uncertainty, to step forward into the unknown. "Okay," he said, a newfound determination igniting within him. "I'll keep writing. I'll keep sharing. I want to see where this takes me." Mia beamed, her enthusiasm infectious. "That's the spirit. And who knows? Maybe you'll even find a way to turn this into something more. Like a book or a collection of poems." The thought sent a thrill through him, a rush of excitement mingled with fear. A book. The idea felt both exhilarating and daunting, a dream he had tucked away in the recesses of his mind. But now, it felt tangible, within reach. "Yeah, maybe," he said, a smile creeping across his face. "But I'll need your help. I can't do this alone." "Of course," she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "We'll brainstorm ideas, work on drafts together. I'll be your biggest cheerleader." As they walked through the park, the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Brad felt lighter, as if the burdens he had carried for so long were slowly lifting. He glanced at Mia, her laughter ringing like music in the air, and realized how much he had missed this connection. It was more than just friendship. It was a partnership, a shared journey towards something greater. "Hey, do you remember that old coffee shop we used to go to?" he asked, a wave of nostalgia washing over him. "The one with the terrible Wi-Fi but the best pastries." Mia laughed, her eyes sparkling with memories. "How could I forget? We spent hours there, dreaming about our futures. Let's go back," he suggested, a grin spreading across his face. "We can write there, brainstorm ideas, and eat our weight in pastries." "Now you're talking," she replied, her excitement palpable. "I'll bring my notebook, and we can make a day of it." As they made their way out of the park, Brad felt a sense of purpose blossoming within him. He was ready to embrace the future, to chase after his dreams with renewed vigor. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, he felt equipped to navigate it. Later that evening, as he sat at his desk, the soft glow of his lamp illuminating the pages of his notebook, Brad felt a surge of inspiration. He picked up his pen, the familiar weight comforting in his hand, and began to write. Words flowed effortlessly, each line a testament to his journey, his struggles, and the hope that now filled his heart. He wrote about the raccoon in the trash, the unexpected connection that had sparked a flicker of joy. He wrote about the poetry slam, the cathartic release that had allowed him to shed the weight of his past. And he wrote about Mia, the unwavering support that had become a beacon of light in his life. As the pages filled, he felt a sense of clarity wash over him. This was more than just writing. It was a declaration of his existence, a promise to himself that he would no longer hide in the shadows. He would embrace the future, whatever it held. Hours later, as he set down his pen, a sense of accomplishment washed over him. He had poured his heart onto the page, and for the first time, he felt proud of what he had created.